One, two, I want to.
Welcome to a new edition of the Neon Jazz interview series with Canadian jazz vocalist Karin Plato. She talked about her latest 2019 CD, This Could Be the One, and this Vancouver vocalist is one of Canada's best-known jazz singers and a Juno Award nominee, Western Canadian Music Award nominee, and multiple National Jazz Award nominee. She started her life in music on the prairies, and around 1996, she got that jazz bug and has not looked back. Karin has been able to study with some of the world's greatest jazz vocalists like Sheila Jordan, Clayton, Elling, and Nancy King. She has appeared at concerts and festivals across Canada and the United States, working as a composer, arranger, music educator, and occasionally as a concert producer. So please get to know her and dig this interview, my friends.
Thanks for taking a minute out for Neon Jazz. I appreciate it.
Oh, well, I appreciate you taking the time to speak with me.
You bet. So let's start off with your latest CD, This Could Be the One. Talk to me about this project. What was the vision for this project?
Well, a few different things. I guess I decided, I'm a jazz standard fanatic, jazz and blues, but I decided to try to incorporate more of my originals this time. And so that's one decision, I guess. And then rather than arrange some, really famous standards that I do love from the jazz genre, I took a few tunes that are maybe not so commonly done as jazz tunes for my rhythm section. A Beatles tune and even a country tune that I'm not professing to know that much about country music or roots and folk music, but it was a song that spoke to me, and I'm speaking about I'm So Lonesome I Could Cry. So it was a number of years, I guess almost 10 years, where I began to amass what I thought would be an interesting group of tunes, specifically for a quintet that I am part of, and that I call my band, even though they all play with many people. So that's kind of the beginning of that, the description of what I was after. And in addition, I had never been able to go into a recording studio and record without the use of headphones. And so I'm pretty delighted with how that felt. I know most of my colleagues and everyone I know is able to beautifully sing or play wearing headphones. That's the standard. But in this situation, we were able to just be in the round without headphones, and it felt much more live that way to me. And so two things about that project.
So talk to me a little bit about the beginnings of your life. Where were you born and raised, and how you got into music?
Well, I'm actually a farmer's daughter. I'm now living in Vancouver, but I grew up in the prairies in Canada, in Saskatchewan, and my mom still lives there where I grew up. It's a tiny, not even large enough to be called a village these days, but it's Elsask, Saskatchewan, which is literally on the border of Alberta, Saskatchewan. And my dad was a grain farmer. And so the way music came to me is most little prairie towns, no matter how small, there's a piano teacher. And I'm sure that still is the case. Maybe there's a guitar teacher too, but our village at the time happened to have a few piano teachers, and I lucked out with a very, very good teacher, throughout most of my formative years. So that's to do with learning about music. But because I am a farmer's daughter, I was also able to help my dad, along with my two sisters, but to help my dad in the farming. So I do know that the first time I was aware that I was possibly writing a song was while driving a tractor, not the tractor with the cab and the heavy-duty sound system, but the cab-less tractor where you're left to your own imagination. And so I think I have to thank my background of being prairie girl for some of the beginnings of what has taken me this far in my life, regarding music and how I use it or how it comes to me.
So you've had the chance to learn from some pretty heavy people in the world of jazz, like Sheila Jordan and Kurt Elling. Talk to me about the lessons that you learned from them.
Okay, well, I could genuinely say that still someone like Sheila Jordan and not a name you've mentioned, but Jay Clayton's another woman that together with Sheila, I learned a lot from. In the case of those two ladies, I learned about being very true to the music when you, as far as going through jazz standards, or the looking at the music and what is on the page, what was composed, what are the correct lyrics, what are the correct notes, knowing that before you go forward and, quote, do your own thing with it. So I really do take that to mind. I love, messing around. I love improvising, of course, but I do try to study what was there on the page. So that's starting from the standpoint of the composer as opposed to going to my favorite recordings of songs. I love doing that too. So that's what I learned from those two ladies. From someone like Nancy King, well, it was really a combination of studying with Nancy and then one of her musical partners, her main partner, I guess for a number of years, and that's pianist Steve Christofferson. And in that case, it was more a reflecting on what you think your strengths are at the time, and and maybe knowing that just because a bebop tune is just ripping fast, in its original form, perhaps you're not quite capable of doing that yet. But just to be practical with your study of what your goal is with a particular piece of music or within the genre, and just patiently going through the steps necessary. And definitely with Nancy, to always think of yourself as an instrument and not just a vocalist, but that you are a horn player and listening and tapping into the music that instrumentalists they've done all their homework, so the vocalist needs to as well. And with someone like Kurt Elling, I'd have to say, he is the king of discipline. He is such a disciplined musician. And I know that in his younger days, I know he worked very, very hard on, some of the basic concepts of that maybe I'm too lazy about, but the very specific, detailed things to do with working with time and rhythm and feel. So it's more the level of commitment that someone like Kurt Elling has. So yeah, those would be the famous people that I've been so fortunate to study with a little bit.
So you got bit by the jazz bug back in 1996, and you decided that was going to be your life. Did you ever, even before that, think that being an artist or a performer was going to be a part of your life?
Well, I think maybe in my university years, and I was between 18 and 24, around that age group, I think I had a slightly different vision of I don't know what I was, what path I was on, other than I did think I would be doing music. Music was always, seemed to be a very important part of my life, but I certainly didn't have, until the jazz bug, for real, I don't think I realized just how important continued study or practice of music as a performer, as a composer, as an educator would become. Because yes, it really, I do tend to have quite a one-track mind. My life has always got some kind of music project in it, and but it really wasn't until probably in my 30s. And I just turned 59, but probably in my 30s is when I really started to carve out for myself the music that would become such a passion. And it has ended up being, for the most part, jazz and blues, much more than any other genre. And then as far as performing goes, these days, I'm not on a stage on a weekly basis, but I tend to work towards projects, meaning, a project, a particular date where I know that I want to do this repertoire with this group or this duo. So I seem to work better that way, where I've got little targets to aim for. And now in this case with this recording, it's more like, I suppose, writing a book where you've created this collection, and then you want people to hear it, hopefully, and maybe then see it live and see what changes from the recorded renditions to the changing things that occur within jazz blues.
What was one of the first jazz concerts you saw that really moved you, that really got you inspired?
Oh, that's a good question. And I have to think about that. There will be a number that have kind of, blended into each other as far as timeline. But, I will say, I don't know when this arrived within the timeline for me, but certainly seeing Shirley Horn, and this, when she was alive, and that was later in her career, but getting to see her at Jazz Alley in Seattle. So that's a club setting, but it was a concert that I was very bowled over about that. And certainly here in Vancouver, when Betty Carter was alive, that kind of blew my mind. That kind of performance and commitment again to the music within her rhythm section. And so I can't think back to there have been many, but certainly those would be maybe earlier in my formative years of remembering. Oh yes, I still can see and hear what took place on the stage during that time period. Seeing Pat Metheny, of course, as a younger artist.
So tell me this: why do you love jazz?
I love the freedom in it. And what I mean by that is my personality, my character is maybe coming from a German background. There's a lot of rigidity in my life, so I seem to be very specific about things. But I feel the most free when singing, creating within that jazz umbrella, where although you've done the pre-planning, you make decisions in the moment, in the second, and that is a feeling of freedom and release. So that's what I love about it.
So this is my final question for you. Everyone has a version or interpretation of you, your family, your friends, and your fans, but you know who you are best. Who do you think you are?
I think the older I get, the more I'm getting to know myself, my inner core. I think that I'm determined. And I think that I am a somewhat flawed character as far as being I'm not perfect, but my goal is to be open-minded. I do think I'm open-minded. And as far as the artist that I am, I think I am much better as a composer, creator, arranger than I am as a performer because I deal with this issue of nerves. So that people don't always know. They think, "Oh, you're such a chatterbox. How can nerves really affect you?" But they tend to. So I'm what I call a reluctant performer. I love the music so much. I love creating it, and so I keep trying to, allow myself to accept myself. So that's quite a long-winded answer, and you can already tell by the interview that I do tend to be long-winded, so there's my other quality.
No, it's all good. That's great. And that's a great way to wrap everything up. Thank you for taking some time out to talk about the new album and to talk about your life and music. I appreciate it.
Okay, and I thank you for the time as well. I'll see you on the Internet.
Thanks for listening and tuning in to another Neon Jazz interview, where we give you a bit of insight into the finest singers in Canada, Kansas City, and spots all over the world, giving fans all that jazz. And thanks to Karin for her time, her music, and her stories. If you want to hear more interviews, go to Famous Interviews with Joe Domino on the iTunes Store. Visit Neon Jazz at youtube.com, and for everything Neon Jazz, go to the neonjazz.blogspot.com. Until next time, enjoy the jazz, my friends.
Neon Jazz.